One of the most serious problems we find with bearded dragons is people using improper lighting. This can cause a whole host of issues. So in this video, we can go over a full bearded dragon care guide so you can avoid all these very common problems so you can get the most out of these amazing creatures. Right. Obviously, to start off the video, what is a bearded dragon? So a bearded dragon is a medium-sized lizard from Australia. They are probably the most commonly kept pet reptile in the UK, in America, anywheres really. If people keep reptiles, you probably guarantee people have bearded dragons. Now, bearded dragons, obviously, they do get about medium size. You're talking about 24 inches long, quite hardy. They're very adaptable, hardy. Their care is easy. As long as you do everything right, their care is quite simple and quite easy. And also they have a personality, they're handleable. It's no wonder they are the most loved out of all the pet reptiles and the most commonly kept pet reptile that there is. So obviously, if you're looking at getting yourself a bearded dragon, the first thing you need to get hold of is an enclosure to keep your bearded dragon. Now, bearded dragons do require a 120-gallon enclosure, which is equivalent to a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot enclosure. Now, this is the minimum standard for a fully grown adult bearded dragon. Some people will keep juveniles and younger bearded dragons in smaller enclosures, but generally, once a bearded dragon gets to full size, they do require the 120-gallon 4 by 2 by 2 enclosure. And it's quite important that if you decide you're going to get a bearded dragon, you need to find a space in your home which can accommodate this enclosure. Because so many times people get a bearded dragon, go, oh, I'm going to buy a small cage for now, get the big cage later on. But then they realise I ain't got a space for a big cage, and they end up either getting rid of the bearded dragon or it's kept in too small of a cage, which obviously isn't ideal. So a bit of planning and a bit of thought is required to figure out where you're going to put this 4 by 2 by 2 enclosure. So obviously you've got your 4 by 2 by 2 enclosure, but you need to put stuff in the enclosure, otherwise you can have a very, very bored bearded dragon. Now, quite an important thing to have in your enclosure are a couple of hides, because in your enclosure you're going to end up with a hot side and a cold side. So the best way of doing this is to have a hide both on the hot side and the cold side. We use these kind of hides for the adult bearded dragons. We just find that they just got enough room for them to fit inside, and they've got enough room to actually make their own little burrow kind of thing, so they feel really nice and secure in one of these. Obviously, if you've got a baby bearded dragon, you don't need massive hides. You can use smaller hide, then get a bigger one as they get bigger. Also, bearded dragons, even though you don't see them drink a lot of water, it's always advised any animal you do give them access to some clean drinking water. So just a little water dish, just like this one will do. That's like the little shape of Australia. But yeah, little dish like this, perfectly fine. You don't need a massive water dish, because if you have a massive water dish, it'll just increase your humidity. And bearded dragons don't require very high humidity to start with. And then obviously you need your base, or your substrate as we call it. We here use this stuff, which is Beardy Life. It's even got a nice little picture of a bearded dragon on there for you. And we use that. It normally takes 2 10-litre bags. What is it? No. 2 10-kilogram bags of this stuff. So about 20 kilos of this stuff is enough to fully cover the base of your 4 by 2 enclosure and give you a couple of inches of substrate, so your bearded dragon can, if it wants to, have a bit of a dig around, a bit of enrichment for them. But if you have too small of a layer, literally as soon as they start digging, they're on the bottom and they don't have that time, they don't have that chance to replicate their natural behaviour of burrowing themselves. So what quite a lot of people do is also they'll put the substrate on and they'll kind of wedge the hide on top, so the hide's kind of half buried. Then the bearded dragon will dig itself out its own burrow, so it'll make it how it wants it, and then that is very enriching for them because they get to make their own burrows. So moving on from your enclosure and your bits and bobs in there, such as your hides, we're going to now move on to your lighting and heating, which probably is one of the most important parts of your bearded dragon care, because this is the thing where if you do it wrong, it could give you a list of bad issues such as metabolic bone disease, impaction, all egg bound. It just causes a lot of issues which you don't need to deal with if you do it right the first time. So I'm going to go straight into heating and lighting. So we're going to start with lighting first. So you need to provide your bearded dragon with supplemented UVB. Now, how do we do this? Because you're basically trying to simulate the sun. So to do this in the captivity, in their cages, we use something called T5 UVB lights. Now, for bearded dragon 4 by 2 by 2 enclosure, something like this is what we use. So it's an Arcadia Pro T5 UVB kit. I'm probably holding it upside down now, my luck. But this is what we use. The 39 watt one is just this right size to provide UVB over about 2/3 of the enclosure, so it works really well. Obviously, when you install them, you would put it overhanging the basking area, so the basking and the UVB area are in the same kind of area. So that's how we do that. Also, but obviously that's the lighting side of things, that's a UVB light. That helps them turn all the calcium you're providing their supplementation, turns it into stuff their body can use. They help with their bone growth and everything else. And it's the main thing that'll stop you having to deal with metabolic bone disease. Whereas if you use a 2-week light, that's if you can use 12% or 14%. If you use the 6% forest ones, it's not going to be enough UVB to allow your bearded dragon to get what it needs from it. But obviously, moving on from that, we've got heating. Now, heating-wise, a bearded dragon basking area should be around about 38 to 41 degrees Celsius in the UK. I think in America it's like 100, 110 Fahrenheit. But that's basically what you're looking at on the basking area. So that's your hottest part of the enclosure where they're basking. Then down towards the colder side of the tank, you can be in your mid-20s, so your 25, 26, 27 degrees Celsius is perfectly acceptable. And nighttime drop temperatures, you can even go down as low as probably 18, 17 degrees. It's not going to cause them any problems as long as, you know, in the morning the heater does turn on and it goes back up. But so for heating, what we use is one of these. So this is a Pro Rep basking spot, the 150 watt one. Sometimes you can get away with a 100 watt one, but we just find the 150 watt ones just giving that more intense heat. And if it's probably on the higher end of 41, but if Bob, our bearded dragon, decides he wants to get away from that, he's got a 4x2x2, he can choose, right, I don't want to be warm, I can move away from the heat a little bit, and he can pick and choose where he wants to be, which is why the 4x2 is so important, because it gives you that thermal gradient from your hot side all the way down to your cold side, so that's ideal for them. So probably one of the more fun bit, or one of the more grossest bits of keeping a bearded dragon, is you're feeding your bearded dragon. Now, feeding is something that does change as the bearded dragon gets older. When they're young and they're using so much, they need so much protein to get that growth. Think of them as a gym boy, you know, he's there, wants all that protein shake and that. He's not after the leafy greens, he's after meat. And to a bearded dragon, your meat is bugs. So here in the UK, I'm not 100% sure, I think I've heard this from somewhere, that in America you're not allowed to use locusts. So if someone could confirm or deny that, that'd be quite helpful for me. I'm not 100% sure which it is. But here in the UK, you can either go with crickets, so these lovely little fellas, or you can go with locusts, little hoppers as they're called. You can also go with dubia roaches, mealworms, any kind of insect, feeder insect you'd buy from your local reptile store from online. Don't go out in your garden and pick bugs in the wild, because you do not know where that bug's been, what it's been eating. Stick to store-bought reptile food. It just saves a ton of hassle, to be completely honest with you. Then moving on to salads. Obviously, as a bearded dragon gets older though, it's going to move more towards the greens kind of food, because it doesn't need as much protein anymore, it needs more greens, otherwise your bearded dragon will get overweight. So greens wise, what we use is a mixture of watercress, some rocket. Bob's very fond of red bell peppers in mediation. Don't give him tons of it, but we give him a little bit because it adds a little bit of colour, makes the salad look a bit nicer, or at least my mum says that. But yeah, so basically just that. I mean, you can search on the internet, safe food for bearded dragon, and come up with a massive list of what you can, what you can't, what's counted as a treat. For example, like strawberries, they're like a once a month kind of treat you can give them, but it's just up to your discretion if you want to feed them that. Feeding that. But obviously moving on from feeding, part of your UVB and all the rest of it, you need to supplement their food. Now, how do you supplement a bearded dragon's food? Simply, you get your locusts, say these little buggers, and you got your calcium dust. So you got calcium dust, just try and get that in there. So you got your calcium dust there. All you'll do is you'll sprinkle a bit of that calcium dust on top of the food you're giving them, just to get light coating on them. Then you'll give the bearded dragon the food, and then when they eat the insects, they'll obviously eat the calcium dust as well, and then their body will digest that, and they'll use the calcium dust in working with your UVB. Like, both the systems work together to create the chemical compounds they need for healthy bone growth. So doing one or the other, no good. You have to do them both together, and then that gives you the best possible results. Okay. So one of the last things we're going to talk about the bearded dragons is their handling and their temperament. Now, as babies, they can be a little bit skittish, a little bit worried. Obviously, you think you're such a small bearded dragon and you're such a big human. But obviously, after a while, after a few months of just persistence, get them used to you, get them used to your touch, your smell and everything, they do become pretty chilled. I mean, this is our Bob. He's our resident bearded dragon. But yeah, but as you can see, pretty chilled, pretty handleable. He's perfectly happy, just sat on my hand. He would crawl up my arm and that if he wanted to, but he has a bad habit of running behind my back, so we won't do that with him. But yeah, as you can see, pretty easy to look after, pretty temperament, pretty all round, perfect lizard. But obviously, for the best interest of your bearded dragon, there are common mistakes that a few people make. It's not because people are being nasty or they just don't know the answers. They're just making some silly mistakes. But so we're going to go through a quick list of just common mistakes that people can make. So one of the most common ones is using the wrong UVB. Obviously, we have gone over this before. If you're using a UVB, it should be a strip light that covers 2/3 of the enclosure. Something like the Arcadia T5 UVBs are perfectly fine for this. Obviously, you want to use the 12 or the 14% UVB ones. You don't want to use the 6 because that's just not powerful enough. And the next thing is the small enclosure. So as you can see from the size of Bob, he's not a small lizard. He's 23 inches long. He does require a larger enclosure. So the 4x2x2 is, as I say, a minimum for a bearded dragon. Ideally, in the future, we'd give Bob a bigger enclosure when we have the space for it. But 4x2x2, bare minimum for a fully grown adult bearded dragon. Another thing, which I was guilty of this until a few months ago, is overfeeding your adult bearded dragons with insects. Now, all that happens is if you keep feeding them loads of insects, they've already reached their full size. They're not using that insect protein to grow, longer and stronger. They're growing it to be fat. Yes, I know I can't say much. I'm not the skinniest fella either, but Bob was very fat. And now he's on a proper bearded dragon diet. He's got back to about the right size he should be. So just think of that when you're feeding them. Obviously, when they're babies, you can feed them loads of insects every day because they can use it so much for growing. But when you get to their adult form, you just want to cut down the insects a bit and provide them greens. Give them insects 3 or 4 times a week, but then the rest of their feedings be greens, which they can eat every day pretty much. The last most common problem we get a couple of times is the improper heating for the basking spots. Where lizards, snakes and bearded dragon, like all of them, including the bearded dragon, where they're cold-blooded, they need external heat to digest their food and to do their bodily functions. So if you don't provide that hot spot of 39, there you go. Hey, I'm not done with you yet. If you don't supply that hot spot of 39 to 41 degrees, they're not going to be able to digest their food they've eaten properly. They're not going to be able to digest their food they've just eaten. Okay. Hey, what's up? So they're not going to be able to digest their food they've just eaten properly, and also it can cause other major issues such as impaction, which can be a lethal condition. So just, obviously always keep your heaters controlled by a thermostat. Set the thermostat to 39, 41 degrees, and then you're perfectly fine. Oh, what's going on with you? He's very anxious to get off, so I'm going to put him back in his cage. As a kind of a conclusion, wrap up the whole video, obviously, if you take care of your bearded dragon well, obviously don't just rely on what I say. Look at other YouTube care guides, look on the internet. The RSPB, I think they're called, or RSPCA in the UK, have like specific care guides they provide for people to look after for different species of animals. So not just bearded dragons, leopard geckos, the whole range of reptiles. And, obviously, if you do all your research, don't rush into things. Don't just go and buy a bearded dragon because you want to. Obviously, do all your research, get everything organised, sorted out. You want to be a mini expert on bearded dragons before you get your bearded dragon. And it also just helps you're not going to make those silly little mistakes, which can, worst case scenario, can lead to the bearded dragon's death. Best case scenario, you just learn the mistake and then you fix it. So it's not a massive, just basically do your research. But if this video has been helpful for you and helpful to you today, I would much appreciate if you give it a like, a comment. If you have anything you want to say, any questions or anything, please feel free to put it in the comment sections. And we will see you in our next video.